right now, so I'm going to get to them a little later. But the beginning of the show, all right, I'm dedicating this. Well, it's a tribute to my man Dusty Baker, okay? The winningest black manager in the history of Major League Baseball, all right? He has his exact win total is, I'm going to get that to you all in a minute, but he's the seventh winningest manager in Major League Baseball history. The seventh, okay? And I just checked it this morning, he's only about a few games short of Sparky Anderson, who was at number 6. But yes, Dusty retired last week when his Houston Astros were beat in the American League Championship Series by the Texas Rangers. And yeah, and so, of course, Houston and Dusty, they won the World Series last year. That was Dusty Baker's first ever World Series win as a manager, okay? So he just got the World Series. That was so beautiful to see, so happy, all right? And it was complicated, too, if you are a Yankee fan for a lot of people, because him being a manager of the Astros, all right, who Yankee fans hate and all that. But, yeah, Dusty is my guy, and I'm just going to just do a little piece that I did on Dusty, man, and there's a lot of things that I can say about him, but I think I'm going to just do this piece for you all first, and then afterwards come back and talk a little more. All right, folks. So I first knew of Dusty Baker as the manager of the San Francisco Giants. It took many years before I found out that he played 19 seasons himself in the major leagues, an all-star in 1981 and 1982. National League Championship Series MVP in 1977, where he and his LA Dodgers would play the Yankees in the World Series and lose in 6 games. That's the same amount of games that it took the Yankees to beat these Dodgers in the World Series again the following year. The two teams matched up again in the World Series in 1981, with the Yankees winning the first 2 games. But this time, Dusty and the Dodgers responded and won 4 straight games to win the World Series. Dusty spent 8 seasons playing for the Dodgers in the middle of his career, but the most awesome part about Dusty's playing career may be where he spent the first 8 years of his career, beginning at the age of 18, well, 19, and that was a much younger teammate of Henry Aaron. For myself, growing up, Barry Bonds was the National League most valuable player multiple times over with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and in the offseason following the 1992 season, Bonds left Pittsburgh to play for the San Francisco Giants, which was the team where his godfather Willie Mays and his father Bobby Bonds played for. Barry's first season in San Francisco was Dusty's first year as a manager in the major leagues. I did not know this at the time as a kid, but Dusty and Barry's father Bobby grew up in the same area in Southern California, and more on that in a few minutes. Dusty would manage San Francisco for 10 seasons through 93, right, through 2002. 2002 was the first and only season that Barry Bonds would play in the World Series. It was Dusty's first World Series as a manager. The Giants were up 3-2 in the series and led Game 6 5-0 in the 7th inning, but they blew that game and lost, and then they lost the World Series in Game 7. That was Dusty's final game managing the San Francisco Giants, and the following year, he was the manager of the Chicago Cubs, only to be up 3-2 again, this time in the National League Championship Series, with Games 6 and 7 at home, and the Cubs lost both in a miserable defeat for Cubs fans who at that time had not seen their team win a World Series in 95 years. The first time that I met Dusty was in 2006, late in that season, a season in which the Cubs would finish 66 and 96. Rumors were swirling around that Dusty would be let go by Chicago at the end of the season. I remember sitting next to him and another reporter in the Shea Stadium visitors dugout and us talking about how it wasn't his fault, but when a team has such a rough season in the standings, the manager will always take the blame. The next time that I would see Dusty was 2 years later when he became the manager of the Cincinnati Reds. I was doing stories on the decline of the African-American ball player in Major League Baseball and about the lack of black managers throughout the history of Major League Baseball. Dusty gave me some time to talk with him before the game inside of the visitors manager's office. And folks, this is the first thing I asked Dusty that day. And the first thing I asked him was how he got interested in baseball as a kid.
Well, actually, I got interested as a kid because we all played. And my dad was a Little League coach, and my dad was Bobby Bonds' coach. He's 4 years older than me, and so I was always hanging around Bobby and my dad. And, we played baseball in the yard, played baseball at the park, we played baseball everywhere in the street, we played baseball everywhere we could play. And so that's when I first got interested in baseball, plus I was a big Dodger fan growing up in Southern Cal. And Tommy Davis was my hero. He wore number 12, and that's where I wear number 12. And then I was fortunate enough to get drafted by the Braves out of high school, foregoing some football and basketball scholarships, and I didn't have a baseball offer. And that's where I met the great Hank Aaron, and then I hung around with Hank for a few years, and then ended up being traded to L.A., wearing my hero's number, playing his position and batting in the same order that he was batting in. Tommy Davis, I don't know if you know, he's a New Yorker, and a heck of a baseball player and a heck of a man, and ended up being one of my closest friends.
I then asked Dusty back in 2008, as a lifelong baseball man, how it felt to have so few black American players in Major League Baseball and a seemingly lack of interest in the black community towards the sport.
Well, it was totally different as a kid when I grew up. But, we had a lot of sponsorship. Baseball wasn't expensive to play, where now you need everybody has their own bat bag, aluminum bats, costing $200-300 a piece, a glove costing $150-200, shoes, insurance. You had to cover your own uniforms a lot of times. So economically, it's become unfeasible for a lot of minorities to play, especially if you have a lot of kids. And at the same time, the cost of travel teams are expensive. Select teams are expensive. I know some guys that are paying $3,000 to $5,000 for their kids to play, and the average person can't afford that kind of money. So that's especially if you have more than one child. So, and the fact that baseball only gives 11.5 scholarships, I think, to colleges. So everybody almost on the whole team is on a partial scholarship. And so if you're going to a university, it costs $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to go to, and you got to have scholarships. Somebody has to come up with the remainder of that hat for money, whether it's $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 a year. And so it's made it almost economically, impossible or tough to play, especially when football and basketball give full scholarships. You don't go to the minors. You go right to the pros if you make it. To the big league, so to speak, and so it's become tough to play. My son plays baseball, and invariably a lot of times, he's one of the few minorities out there that's playing baseball. So I think the RBI program has helped out quite a bit, to make it possible, for young minority kids, to play, because you fall in love with the game as a kid. And the cost of going to the ballparks. We went Little League Day. They always took us a couple times a year, but now the cost of the seats, it makes it boils down to me, almost to to economics. And so we have to find a way to have these young kids fall in love with baseball, make it available to them, because if you make it available to them, most of the time kids are going to, enjoy, playing the game.
How important do you think it is for be a father to be in a young man's life, just in order for him to get interested in the game and just to be able to learn the skill of playing baseball?
Well, that's very important. I mean, like I said, number one, it starts, if the father don't like baseball, there's a good chance the son's not going to like baseball. And that's just like fishing. I go fishing and hunt now because I was with my dad. And I asked some other kids, hey, man, do you like to fish or hunt? And they're like, no, I never did it before because my dad didn't do it. And so I was very fortunate, like I said, to have my dad as a little league coach. My son's very fortunate to have me as a big league coach, to come be in the big league surroundings, be out here, with amongst the big league players. And, it's still, for him, he grew up being around Barry Bonds all the time. And then he went right from Barry Bonds to Sammy Sosa to Ken Gifford Jr. and, over here with Brandon Phillips and, a lot of Latin and African-American players. And, to motivate him that he can make it, to see, some of the rewards of putting in that time to make it. So it's very, very important. And I think that's another reason, a lot of the kids aren't playing because a lot of the father figure amongst our people, aren't present. And, mom can only do so much.
Now let's go all the way back to 1974, April 8th, when Henry Aaron hit his record-breaking home run to surpass Babe Ruth as the all-time home run king. Dusty was the on-deck batter, and I asked him what he remembered from that night.
Well, I remember, a cold night in April, and Hank telling me that he wanted to get it over with. He says, I'm tired of this. He said, I'm going to get it over with right now. And I said, everything else he told me came true, so I was like, okay, I guess he's going to get it over with. And Al Dine threw him a pitch, and he hit it over the left field wall, and they stopped the game. His mom and dad and family came out on the field, and then I was hitting next, and I was on the way to plate after the ceremony was over with, and I heard the seats clanking, like clank, clank, clank. I turned around, everybody's leaving. So I was like, wait a minute, I'm about to hit too, you know what I mean? So, that's what I remember. It was a very, very, that's probably one of the biggest and grandest occasions in my life, even though it wasn't me doing it. But I was just so happy for Hank that it was over with. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on him. There's a tremendous amount of, you've heard about, the different hate mail that he got and the different things that he got because people really didn't want him to break. Most people didn't really want him to break Babe Ruth's record because, Babe was, was what, symbolized America. Because I remember when I used to watch, the war movies, and if they wanted to catch an infiltrator, they'd ask, who's Babe Ruth? And if they knew who Babe Ruth was, then he's shot. So, that was big, especially at that time. It was even bigger at that time because the civil rights movement was live. Riots were alive. Vietnam or anti-Vietnam. That was a very tumultuous time in our country, and Hank seemed to hopefully bring a lot of people together at that time.
It is well documented how Henry Aaron received death threats.
That's true. I was there. Myself and Ralph Garr with him almost daily, and we saw some of the threats. And I remember one day he got a letter. Some guy in a red coat was going to shoot him at the stadium, and so Ralph and I were looking for this guy in a red coat the whole time. He had a bodyguard with him, Kevin Wardlow, I think his name was at the time, Calvin Wardlow. And so Hank didn't seem concerned at all. And, we're like, Hank, we're down with you, man, no problem. But me and Ralph were looking around the whole time just in case, somebody was there. But the death threats were real. He always had two rooms. He'd alternate which room he slept in. So in case somebody found out what room he was in, he was under an alias. And, like I said, we're with him all the time. And especially, it was big, the fact that, he did have to have a bodyguard all the time.
So as a young player, what kind of influence did Henry Aaron have in your career and your life?
Well, he had a tremendous influence on my life and my career. Because the day I signed, he promised my mom that he'd be my dad away from home. And he did. And he took care of me. Things that young people don't like to do. Like he made me go to church. He made me get up and eat breakfast. He didn't like me swearing. things that things that your parents would do. And he would like tell us different things about things he went through to get to where he is. He would tell us, hey, don't go over there, it's not safe, don't go over here. And he taught us how to train, he taught us how to take care of ourselves, and he taught us how to conduct ourselves as professionals and men, with class and dignity.
Right. So, okay, now what was it like to manage Barry Bonds and then Ken Griffey?
Well, I tell you, I mean, they're different, but they're similar. I mean, they're everybody wants to know who's the greatest. I mean, great is great, and Barry worked hard. He worked exceptionally hard. This guy's concentration level, and nothing seemed to bother him. Even if he had problems off the field, he could separate his game from life's problems, and a lot of times it even motivated him, to do more. The more people booed him, the more they got on him. I mean, the better he did. And this guy's, concentration level and vision were unparalleled to me and to anybody other than, Hank Aaron. And Ken Griffey Jr., had not sustained so many injuries, might have been better or greater than both. And Griff loves the game. I mean, one day I saw him, while his clothes on, this guy had scars and divots and stuff everywhere when he really didn't have to play anymore, but the fact that he loved to play. And he played the game like a very young man. I mean, he was at the ballpark early. I mean, this guy and Barry both loved playing baseball.
So, as somebody who spent a lot of time around both Henry Aaron and Barry Bonds, just what's your take just on the whole situation with Barry Bonds breaking Hank Aaron's record, just after Henry Aaron had to deal with everything that he dealt with, during that time?
Well, I mean, if Hank didn't mind, I didn't mind really, because like I said, I grew up with Barry's father, and I helped Barry the day he was born. So, to break a record like Hank Aaron's, I mean, nobody ever thought that Lou Gehrig's record was going to be broken. I mean, somebody's going to break Barry's record too. It might take, who knows, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, you never know, because it took a long time to break Hank's. But, records are made to be broken. I don't think Hank, has any remorse about anything, because Hank is a very humble but confident man, and very confident in himself.
On April 15th, 1987, the 40-year anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking baseball's color barrier, Los Angeles Dodgers general manager Al Campanis was asked on Nightline by Ted Koppel why he believed there were no black managers or black general managers in Major League Baseball. Campanis said it was because blacks weren't smart enough. I asked Dusty if this motivated him to want to become a manager.
Well, I mean, actually, it was my former GM, Al Campanis, at that time. And so, no, it didn't inspire me at all, actually, because this is not what I wanted to do. To me, this is what God wanted me to do. And, had it not been for that, baseball would not have made a concentrated effort to try to go get some minorities to prove that was wrong. And at that time, the guys that were sort of at the perfect age in their careers, at the end of their careers, guys like, Cito Gaston, Hal McRae, Don Baylor, myself, and actually we all, with Hank Aaron and Frank Robinson and Curt Flood, Bobby Tolan, we all went to Dallas, Texas, at the winter meetings to try to figure out a way to get minorities, guys, jobs in baseball after they get out, because as a general rule, when you get out, you're done, and you don't get the same opportunities that white players get, whether it's in broadcasting or PR or team spokesman or whatever, unless you're just a superstar. And so I went there to try to find some guys jobs, and I had a job as a stockbroker my first year out of the game. And Bob Kennedy came up to me there, and he said, Al Rosen would like to talk to you. And so I went over to talk to Mr. Rosen. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't really know him. And Bob Kennedy actually was very influential with the Braves up in there, and he trying to sign me at 18 years old, which I also did, though. And so one thing led to another. They said, Dusty, you need to come join us. Stock market crashed. I got divorced. Some things weren't happening good in my life. And so I went to Lake Arrowhead with my brother and our daughters to go pray and ask for the Lord to tell me what to do. And when I was checking in line, the owner of the Giants, Bob Lorry, was at the same place I was at, and he says, "You need to come join us." And I said, "How many times you been here?" He said, "It's my first time." I said, "Mine too." And so I instantly went and called my dad. Immediately went and called my dad, and I said, "Dad, you think that's a sign?" And he says, "Well, son, I don't think you really want to see it, because you went up there to ask for a sign or to pray on it, and before you even checked in a hotel, the sign was right there." So he said, "You need to go ahead and do what the Lord wants you to do." And so at that moment, I agreed to be a coach for 5 years. And if I wasn't the manager, because I give orders better than I take them, so if I wasn't the manager within 5 years, then I was going to go into broadcasting, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up being the manager.
And finally, I asked Dusty about what it's like to be a manager and have constant speculation about your job security in the public and criticism when you don't necessarily deserve it.
Well, hey, man, that's how it is. I mean, we're held at a different standard. I believe that. And that's what George Thompson said at Georgetown, and a lot of people, gave a bunch of stuff over it, but it's true. And, we have to win. And if not, it tends to be more your fault than anybody else's fault. So, you deal with that. And some of the struggles and different things you went through in your life to get to this point, it made you strong and strengthened you, for this situation and this challenge. And then someday, hopefully, you will no longer be seen as a black manager, but just as a manager, period.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, all right? It was an honor.
That team, Hank Aaron, is that team good?
And at the end of it, if you heard somebody in the background and you asked Dusty, that team with Hank Aaron that you were on, were you guys any good? And Dusty said, "We could hit." That was funny. Yeah, so Dusty Baker, man. And to be honest with you guys, it's, I'm very appreciative to Dusty and all that. And so it's sometimes a little hard to talk about this without getting a little choked up a little bit because, he didn't have to do any of this. And, so that was 2008, right, before a game, and he lets me come into his office. So, so that was very nice. So anyhow, all right, so now Dusty's managerial track. So he was with Cincinnati. So